Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Gurus, where every Friday we explore stories of international business and speak with industry leaders operating around the world. I'm your host, Philip Auerbach of Auerbach International. Thank you so much for joining us. As you know, we start each podcast with a running segment called Faux Pas Fridays, where we explore a funny blooper or mistranslation that does not quite convey the professional image that your organization wants to project. And since today's guest was educated in Russia, I will use a blooper from the magazine Soviet Weekly, which was published during communist times, and the blooper will demonstrate how one small word can dramatically change a meaning. So a sign in English in a Moscow hotel room said, "If this is your first visit to the USSR, you are welcome to it." So with that, today's guest is Adi Patil. Adi is a seasoned digital marketing and software development executive, a frequent keynote speaker, and a prominent figure in US tech marketing ecosystems. He was schooled at the Anglo-American School of Moscow and has a company in India that provides web and mobile app development, as well as IT and IoT, Internet of Things services. He is the co-CEO of StartItUpNYC in New York, obviously. Welcome, Adi. Delighted you can be with us.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So perhaps you could start by telling us a bit about your background and how you grew up and your schooling, and then how you gained some of your global experience.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Happy to share. So yeah, I'm one of those kids that moved around quite a bit. I've been through, I think, 5 schooling systems right up until I finished high school, 5 different boards of schooling, so completely different curriculums. I was born in Maryland, right in Shady Grove on the Red Line, close to DC. And, a few years later, my dad moved back to India and started his own IT company that at the time built customized CD-ROMs, if you'll believe it. Like, this is in the 1980s. Yeah. So, after a while, that didn't quite work out for him. And, eventually something surprising happened where, in the 9th grade, I got a chance to move to Moscow in Russia. And I never lived in or been to that part of the world at all. And people didn't really encourage it, but I knew my experience will be different because I was about to go to this amazing school called AAS, the Anglo-American School of Moscow, which was run by the British and US Embassy and had kids from 42 countries. So, what good preparation for a future like this. I got to grow up in this diverse background so early in life. And right when I finished schooling from there, I was back in the US and did my undergrad in Virginia from George Mason, master's in DC from Georgetown. And life just kept moving. Moved to New York after that. Again, a very diverse place, a melting pot. What better than New York to get to know all the people from the world that come in together and live together, and cultures are mixing. And I worked with 2 big firms, of course, Verizon first, and then Yelp. And was done with the corporate life eventually, and started my own company with a buddy of mine, Nico, who was actually my roommate at the time. And we lived in this loft in Brooklyn, and came up with this idea of starting a company that does development and marketing for startups. And that's how StartItUp was born. And it's been 5 years since then, and we're still going.
Very good. It's fascinating. And when you lived in Moscow, I assume your family was there as well?
Yes. Yeah. Dad was working for Coca-Cola Eurasia, that region, and was a VP of a department. My mom was with us as well. So yeah, it was like a family life after school, and experiencing Russia, not knowing the language at all, but at the same time living in a bit of a bubble with all of the kids that are there from like other countries,
Right.
So going through the same thing.
Yeah, that's a wonderful experience. Incredible international experience that way. So you primarily have an IT company at this point, right? And your IT company, from what I understand, also has branches in India or does some operations in India. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. We do the technical development in India, like our development team is in India, but it's a mix of things. So we understand that, design wise, the US market and the Western market is very different from what it is like here locally. So our UI, UX and design teams are in the US, our content teams are in the US, and then our development teams, only our tech teams are in India. So we somehow managed to get all these guys working together, in harmony and, producing for our clients.
And your US employees, are they primarily Indian or American, or is it just mixed?
Our US employees, apart from myself, are, I'm also American by citizenship, but I would say like, other than that, they're all American. And then our employees in India are all Indian, of course.
And what are the interactions like? Of course, the Indians speak English, sometimes with a heavy accent that Anglo-Americans don't really understand very well. But what are the business interactions and communications like, and the expectations? Americans are very punctual and very deadline oriented, and India, with its 5,000 plus year history, is much more relaxed, shall we say, about a lot of that, except in the IT field, I imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the culture is totally different. And all the team members have to work together in understanding that. And I think that's where people like me come in the picture, because we kind of bridge the gap, having the experience of having lived here, being exposed to this culture, and then being exposed to the other culture for like half of my life as well. We kind of have to continuously bridge the gap, because there's definitely misunderstandings in terms of deliverables. Although the team in India speaks English, oftentimes the language barrier does come in, like you pointed out, because of the accents or just the lingo. The lingo in America and in India is different. So usually when things are on paper, like any email communication or any of the task management systems that we use, any communication there, that's crystal clear, no problem. But if things are only discussed verbally and people are not taking notes, then sometimes things are misunderstood and could cause problems. So yeah, they get used to working together. Usually when there's new members, then there's a learning curve. But yeah, culturally, also in terms of the work mode itself, like luckily the development field in India, the guys are really serious, but their style of working can be really casual, because they're constantly exploring and they might do more than what they're briefed to do, because they're trying to do better. But sometimes you have to pull them back and be like, we got to look at the hours, we got to look at the timelines. You can't just make those decisions yourself. It kind of depends on the client, if something needs to be better or not. So yeah, there's a difference in style, and we're constantly accounting for that and making up for that. But other than that, it's a lot of fun, a great exchange, and I would say you both cultures get to learn a lot from each other. They respect each other's holidays, they respect each other's religions. So that comes in too, right? Because India is a place with a lot of religions, a lot of culture, a lot of holidays that need to be respected, the teams and other things. And similarly in the US, but more so in India, I would say, like, it's a little laid back, like you pointed out sometimes. So that needs to be understood. At the same time, India works 6 days a week at the very minimum, sometimes even 7. And then the guys in the US usually, on a Friday afternoon, they're like, okay, we're getting done for the weekend. We'll circle back Monday. So, so there's pros and cons. Right. Yeah.
Give me some examples of this sort of casual work environment. You were saying like the India staff may, I'll use the word, go off on tangents perhaps. And can you describe examples of what they've done in that way?
Yeah, definitely. So sometimes there's projects where the timelines are stretched, right? So one of the projects I was recently working on, um, 1 week went by, 2, 3, 5, 6, or maybe 8 weeks went by, and there's not a single doubt. Like I'm here like every week talking to my teams to like clear any doubts that they may have regarding the project in the development phase. And I go by like 2 months, this team has no doubts and everything according to them is going smoothly. So, you know, when it comes time for like me testing any application or process before delivering it to the client, I suddenly find things that are not, precisely done. So I start asking questions, and I have to kind of ask questions for them. And the reason is this: the reason is they kind of make assumptions. Once they get a brief of something, instead of, they're so hesitant to ask their senior a doubt because they almost sometimes see it as, uh, they don't want to look stupid, or they don't want to look like they don't know. They don't want to show me that they don't know something.
Hmm.
So they'll just make assumptions that a brief means something, and take care of that task. So that's something I've not seen in the US. In the US, my team's always asking questions, maybe even more questions than needed, but they're making sure that the communication line is clear.
Hmm.
Whereas the teams in India generally hesitate a bit, and don't want to ask you too many doubts until much later in the project. So you have to like be behind them and find the doubts for them, or like ask tricky questions so the doubts come out. So bring it out of the team, you know. So that's a cultural difference there. Like in the US, people are not really shy of communicating with their boss and letting them know that I have these issues. Whereas in India, they're a little shy of communicating with their boss. That's what I've noticed, and that has caused problems in the past. And I've been very clear with my team that the communication line is open every single day, 24 hours, and you need to just tell me. It's not like I'm gonna get mad at you if you don't know something, you know.
Um, yeah, no, that's fascinating. Um, in India, there's a very strong sense of hierarchy, both the class system and caste system, and within a company. Uh, I'll give you an example that I experienced, which I thought was fascinating. Um, I have a language translation agency, and years ago we used a company in India to provide our translations. We don't do that anymore. Um, and the woman who ran the agency invited me to her daughter's wedding, me and my family to her daughter's wedding, which was extraordinary. And I casually asked, are you inviting other employees of your company, like people that I was communicating with, her secretary and other managers? And she reacted, very strangely, like, basically, of course not. Why would I even think of that? Whereas in American, if you have weddings or family events like that, christenings, whatever, you would often invite your coworkers because those are the people you associate with each day. So do those kinds of issues arise in terms of hierarchy and what people will or will not say or do, or look at you as the big bad boss or something, or even though you try to break down the barriers, do they still perceive the barriers?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure they do. I think they're easy with me now with time, the ones that have been with me for a while. But at the same time, I know they share things with each other that they don't with me, as well. Although from my point of view, I'm not like I'm not very typical in that sense because I've had a lot of international exposure. So my thought process is really different. I don't see any inequality between my team and myself. We're just two different professionals, and
Right.
that's about it. But yeah, they do think of me as a boss and someone senior, and they want to keep that difference as well to a certain extent. They're not very comfortable. Sometimes I'm like asking my team as well other things like how was your weekend? What did you do? Did you like go out? And I can also sense that they're not even comfortable sharing too much regarding that, because they don't want to be judged by me.
Right.
Although I'm not here to judge them at all.
Right. Exactly. That's fascinating too. You mentioned about meetings that you have, when you put something in an email, then it's clear. But when you have internal meetings with your American and India teams together, does someone write a summary of the meeting of, who agreed to do what and so forth, so it's then clear what each person's supposed to do?
Yeah. So we use a couple of task management systems, and one of them is Asana.
Mm-hmm.
So we have somebody that actually, once we decide on any tasks that are divided in the meeting, they immediately put the task on Asana,
Right.
with the description, and assign it to that person. And then I usually go in, or my business partner goes in and verifies that information, and so on and so forth, to just keep things really clear.
Right.
And what we've done now, like after realizing a lot of things, is that we kind of try to keep the communication lines on the regular open through us, not directly, because if they directly talk without me being involved, then there still could be miscommunication, verbally, if they just have like a casual meeting.
Right.
So yeah, between the design teams and the tech teams, it's just usually us that I or my business partner, we convey the messages and the tasks and the issues and all of that. So, and in India, I speak in the local language as well. If I feel like some of the devs are, not comprehending things in English, then I, have a word with them in Hindi.
In Hindi. So does everyone speak Hindi, or do people come from other states where, there are other regional languages?
Yes, I mean, people come from other states, but Hindi is the national language, so it's
Right.
most commonly used. So most people that have like studied and gotten educated have at least learned Hindi at some point. So yeah, I would say like 70 to 80% of the country would speak Hindi.
Right.
Definitely.
Or at least understand it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned about Indian holidays. The US has 6 primary holidays, and then there are perhaps another 4 to 6 more secondary, what I call secondary holidays, such as Martin Luther King's Day and Veterans Day and President's Day and so forth. With India, does the office simply just close down on the holidays, or does the office stay open and each person might take off depending on what his religion or beliefs are?
Yeah, so it's a little complicated. I mean, a lot of holidays, the entire office is closed. But apart from that too, there are people who take off according to their religion, because it's a place that we have in India has Hinduism, and then within that, like a lot of castes, as you mentioned earlier, like there's the caste system, so different things they follow. And then we have Jainism in India as well. We have Buddhism up in the north, right? And we have Muslims. We have a good enough Christian population as well. And yeah, you're right. Yeah, so the Parsis as well. So yeah, so there's holidays for all of that, and all of the religions, festivities, and important dates. And India kind of takes off for all of it. So there's a lot of holidays. I mean, every month there will be like a couple of holidays, apart from the weekends.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why people work 6 days to help make up for the holidays.
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly. Yeah.
And is that typical throughout India, that the work week is 6 days, or is it just in your company?
No, it's pretty typical throughout India. Some companies do alternate Saturdays, and then alternate Saturdays are off. But yeah, mostly people work 6 days.
Wow. What about other differences, such as marketing? Do you have clients in India for whom you might develop an app or something, but you would market it very differently in the United States or in the Western world?
In India, simply because like the way our business model is structured, we wouldn't make margins on it, on like whatever service we provide in India. Right. But yeah, in terms of marketing, to address the earlier part of your question, it's very different marketing in the US and in India. And reason being, again, like the consumer itself, the consumers are different. The marketing lingo itself is different, and what people respond to
Mm.
is also different. So that's the reason we don't have a marketing team in India that works for US clients at all, because it's
Right.
very difficult for them to understand and prepare content according to that market. Even if their English is amazing, even if they have like an honors in English, like that's language is not the issue. The issue is the American consumer, which Americans understand best, you know.
Of course.
So yeah, we've kept that really separate. All American content is developed in America in our company.
So in American marketing, the general appeal is to price, primarily price, but also efficiency and somewhat service and so forth. And in other countries or other industries, price is more downplayed. For example, in Japan, price is downplayed. What counts far more is quality and the quality, longevity, and the reputation of the company and so forth. So in India, when you market, what are the primary benefits that one would emphasize versus what would emphasize in the United States?
Yeah, so obviously in India, the numbers are like really big, right? I mean, it's a big population. So generally products with a really low price even could make billions, if you will. I mean, because of the population,
Mm-hmm.
something that's like worth 5 cents, it just has to reach like a very small percentage of the population to be
Right.
like $1 billion company,
Right.
so there's that. The difference in advertising and marketing is that the consumer here responds to a lot of emotions. So you'll see a lot of ads, whether someone's selling insurance, whether someone's selling a car or a chocolate.
Mhm.
Uh, Most ads are really emotional, and cheesy.
Right.
You know, they're all like from an emotional standpoint, getting families together in the ad, or like
Mhm.
a lot of ads about like people falling in love or like whatever it may be. Like it's like that. Whereas I see
Right.
American ads like very very real, very to the point, you know, and get the direct message across to the target audience exactly how they want to hear it, and it's to the point. That's how I see American advertising.
Mm.
And it can be fun, it can be humorous, and all of that, but it's direct. uh, and in India it's really indirect. They'll be selling chocolates, but they'll show you like a whole family that's like having fun together, and all that stuff. So it's based on emotion, and they'll word it as like sharing joy with your family with this chocolate.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because American advertising also should pull at the heartstrings, pull at emotions, excitement, joy, love is a good one, as you mentioned. Um, often fear. For don't let this happen to you. Therefore, get our product, whatever. So American advertising is also emotional, but what you're saying is that Indian ads are much more like family oriented and um, family and group oriented and much more indirect, I suppose. As
Yeah.
you gave that wonderful example, sharing the joy, sharing family joy together with chocolate or something like that.
Yeah, it's not very direct, I would say. And you're right, I agree with you. American ads are emotional as well. Like I've seen ads that scare you or get you excited or whatever. So those emotions are there, but they're still like focused on the product.
Mm,
You know.
right. Um, I know that there's a market in India for luxury goods because people have massive luxury goods and there are millions of people who are extremely wealthy. So in terms of pricing, does one do you price based on perceived value in general, or does it depend if you're trying to get a mass market through a very low price, or to price based on capturing market share, or again perceived value of quality or excellence or something like that, the sort of boutique rarity of something, or does it depend on the product and service?
Yeah, it honestly purely depends on the product, and then the marketing strategy is kind of conducted accordingly. But in its core, in terms of luxury goods, you know, Now, there are brands that all of us know, right? And Indians will buy those brands because you have to understand, they're so family oriented and friend oriented, and there's a culture of groupism, but that also brings competition. Which means, like, if I buy a Mercedes, then my cousin wants to buy a Mercedes, his cousin wants to buy a Mercedes. Like, everyone wants to be at a certain level in society, and even if they're friends and family, they're still competing, So the brands that are big, you see Indians here buy, even if they're double the price. Like, these cars are really expensive, more expensive in India, but a certain class of people will buy multitudes of them.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're a new brand entering the luxury market, then you have to establish yourself first, right? So it's kind of a reverse engineered process where, like, what you want to do is first get in with the people that can afford you at the price that you want. And, get your target audience in. And then if the product is good, you will make so much business just from word of mouth once you get in the right circles of society. It'll work out in the most organic way you can think of. Now, if you want to do something at scale, then you have to look at competition, price yourself accordingly and all of that. If you're not a luxury product, but if you're a luxury product, then you don't need like a lot of scale. You can have a small volume of sales and make millions. Then you just have to get in the right circles and do marketing very organically. And just make sure your product's good, and people will do the sales for you. People are looking for new stuff all the time.
Is this the poor people as well, or you're talking about the middle class?
I'm talking about I would say, higher middle class and up.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And do they rely on social media as people do here, or is it more word of mouth? And
it's social media is a big one, but it's a lot of word of mouth, because they'll also be, so for example, like, I see an ad about a product, right? I might like it and want to try it, but if a friend of mine shares that ad with me, or like, say I share that ad with you, then my mind will go more towards like actually getting it,
right.
Like right away purchasing. So it's more, I would say, in those classes of society, the richer classes of society, it's more word of mouth. Social media influences, but the final decision of buying, people always take second opinion, over here, because there's so many people, and people are always messaging each other like, I saw this ad, should I buy it? They always need a second, opinion. They won't make that decision themselves right away, most of them.
In India, you mean, right?
Yeah, in India.
Yeah. You reminded me of the expression "keeping up with the Joneses." Do you know that? I don't know if you're too young for that.
No, I've heard that expression for sure, but I probably don't relate to it as much as you do, but I have heard it.
Right. Well, I don't keep up with the Joneses. Personally, I don't care what the Joneses do, but it's the, it's what you were saying about keeping up with your neighbors and your cousin. Your cousin has a Mercedes, and therefore you have to get one. Your friends have it, so you all have to, look at the same level, I guess. Rise equally in that way. It's fascinating. In terms of, let me see. Again, sort of back to the hierarchy. If a boss suggests something, are most people likely to do it, or is there going to be a lot of pushback? In this country, there would be more pushback. Well, it depends on the companies, of course, the company culture. But if people don't agree with the situation, they would likely, push back, or they would, give other alternatives or something like that. Is that more common? Is that common in India as well, or is it much more the boss said something, we just do it?
It's mostly the boss said something, we'll just do it. But there's some guys, like, I have some people that work with me, and they definitely like give me alternatives. If they think something's better, they'll share that. But at the same time, eventually they'll be like, but hey, I'm happy to do it the way you want it. And there's pros and cons to that, because sometimes the way you want it is the best way, but sometimes it's not. And then later on, they don't have to take the responsibility if things go wrong, right? Because they're like, you said this, so it's a liability thing. Like people do want to take less liability for issues that come up. So if it's something complicated that they're not 100% sure of, then they'll let me do it my way, because then all the liability of it not working is on me. So yeah.
And the responsibility, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. If the guy's 200% sure that his way is better, then he might, or he or she might, insist that we do it that way. But if they also think it's complicated, they won't take it on them. They'll let me do it my way and mess up if I do, and have me take the blame.
Yes, I'm very familiar with that model. It's very common in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were exposed during your years at the Anglo-American School in Moscow, but did you observe, Russian marketing or Russian behavior, not among your students because they were international, but among the Russians themselves? Because there again, they were then still emerging from this extremely top-down communist society. And there was very rigid, well, during Soviet times, of course, or communist times, there was very little taking personal responsibility because you could get shot or your family could get imprisoned or whatever. But did you, especially if something goes wrong, of course, but did you have any observation of how people behaved in terms of, again, hierarchy or marketing, or what they responded to, what appealed to them?
Yeah, I mean, what I noticed was like two classes of Russians, right?
Mhm.
So I had some Russians attending my school, but they were from a very rich class. Like they were politicians' kids. One of my friends was the sports minister's daughter,
Right.
and stuff like that. And
The elite.
the elites. Yeah, one guy's coming to school. We were like 15 years old. He's coming to school in a Hummer, this massive car, and just parking it himself and getting into school. So I'm like, this is a different class. And then when I went to the malls, or like I went out for dinner, on different streets, I would see the common public.
Mhm.
And I found them a little aloof at the time. Like they didn't interact much with me, or if I had any questions at a mall, then it was, or anywhere on the street, then there was less people that were like very receptive. Like they just didn't want to deal with me, to be honest. They were in their own world, and so it was a contrast, complete contrast of people that I saw. But the common public that I saw in the years that I was there, I want to tell you that I found 90% of them like quite aloof to having conversations with people that are from the outside. They did not really want to interact much, or even if they knew a little bit of English, they didn't want to like make the effort to speak it or
Right.
help. Yeah.
Was it a language issue? I assume you didn't know much Russian. Was it a language issue, or was it, do you think, a cultural issue?
It was both. I don't want to like doubt that some of them genuinely had a language issue to interact with me. So and I made the effort to speak Russian on the streets, but I didn't get the accent right, and it's difficult. It was difficult. But for definitely a lot of them, I would say it was a cultural issue, and they just didn't want to bother interacting with someone that's not from there, and make the effort, even if they understood a little bit of English, they didn't want to make the effort to have that conversation. They just wanted to go about their own business.
Very interesting. Yeah. With your experience, what lessons do you think people need to have in order to thrive in international business?
Yeah, so that's a good one, and I'm still learning mine, but definitely be open to a lot of communication, and there's a lot of bridging the gaps. Understanding the culture and respecting the culture is one. Um, you know, Finding people that can mediate well within your team and
Mm.
giving them those roles. I think that's really important. because you need someone like me, for example, in the
Mhm.
middle. It just makes things easier. It makes things smoother and processes faster.
Right.
Utilizing technology, definitely, all the task management systems that are there, any technology that can help your work part of the processes like be smooth, so you can connect the teams for more like fun activities, just talking and communicating and team building exercises.
Mm.
uh, that's really important, because if you can just make the work process smooth using technology as well,
Right.
and all of that, then you don't have to worry about things going wrong, and you can focus on the team actually bonding together. So that's really important, and I think travel too,
Mm.
because end of the day you have to go and see the people who are in their setting to understand them fully, no matter where you're from. I feel like, so my business partner, actually Nico, he's a Swiss American guy, but he's come to India. He's gone to the north. He's done like yoga camps and
Oh,
vipassana, which is like the silent camp. You basically don't talk for like 2 weeks, and experience the culture and the people here. So now going back, now he's in Hawaii right now, and he's going to LA next. So he kind of travels around, and so now dealing with the teams here, it's really easy for him because he's done all the local stuff here and lived like them. He's taken, like, he didn't come here and live in luxury. He took the local
right.
buses and all of that. So he's experienced life like them. So I think that's also something, if you have a long-term business that is international, you have clients in other places, teams in other places, then I think you should invest in, having those exchanges, cultural exchanges, to
Mm.
understand them fully. And, you'll probably have more long-term experiences with them and probably run a successful long-term international business, with all of
Um,
that.
you talked about team building, and earlier in the podcast, you gave the example that if you ask your Indian employees, like, how was your weekend? What did you do? A lot of people would be very reluctant to answer because that's not something that one talks to the boss about necessarily. But if you were out of it, if you had taken yourself out of the equation or out of the room, um, would your India team talk about just daily life things with your American team? I went to this cool restaurant. I had this great experience. I went on this trip over the weekend. I did a hike, whatever the case may be. Would they talk like that in ways that would not involve you, and they would talk differently in front of you?
Yeah, 100%. There's still some of them that would talk freely in front of me, but yeah, but there's a lot that wouldn't. But then when they have the exchange with each other, they're always discussing things like the prices of goods here and there. They're comparing their rents, and having those exchanges to understand what life is there and what life is here, like here, even some personal stuff. So they have those exchanges, and I know about it because my US team has open exchanges with me. So they sometimes tell me stuff about the team in India that I don't know, which is really funny,
Yeah,
because I've been here, for a while, and
yeah,
I also travel back and forth, but I do spend a part of the year in India. So
right. Yeah,
yeah, so they have those exchanges because they feel like they're on the same plane and they can,
right.
say those things.
I assume they tell you, who's engaged, who's getting married, who's getting divorced, whatever, because they may not, the India team may not share that with you so readily.
Oh yeah. Generally, if it's good news, they will. Like if they're getting married,
Mm,
that's pretty
mm.
big news. They will,
Have
but
a
not
baby,
like the dating life and those kind of things. Like,
right.
don't get into that much.
But they would share that with each other. The
They
dating.
would share that with each other. Yeah, for sure. They would exchange those kind of things with each other, or even if there's someone they like or whatever, like those kind of personal things, they would share with each other for sure.
Tips. Sure, it's fascinating. Um, what about your personal life? What gets you excited outside of work?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I got married in 2020 in the pandemic, which was quite a feat. Um,
Yes.
and with the with the restrictions and rules and regulations regarding the wedding itself, limited guests and all of that. And it's cool because my wife, she's an architect, and she was working in Chicago at the time with this firm called SCB, Solomon Cordwell Bowens, and mostly on like skyscrapers, the Chicago airport, and things like that. So she has good experience as well globally because she also has projects in India. She's doing houses in India. She's
Wow.
doing big apartments in India with like plunge pools in the balconies and stuff
Hmm.
like that. So she's also having fun with her field. So I think outside of work, it's mostly my wife and I, traveling. We love traveling. So we're going now on the 10th of August to Paris. We're going to work from there for a month, and then we're going to Italy. And we both can work remotely, having
Yeah.
projects in the US and India both, but we have enough manpower
Right.
everywhere to like make sure that can be taken care of and we can just leave them. So yeah, most of my time goes in, spend time with my wife and traveling, and that's getting to know the world even more than I do already is really important to me. And I've kind of set up my business according to that. I don't want to be stuck in an office. So my business partner and I both have set up our business model so that we can get a lot of personal time in.
Hmm.
So my entire focus is on my wife and I and what we do in the free time, how much we travel,
Right.
how many things we get to see together.
Yeah.
That's the prime focus apart from work at this point since the last 2 years.
That's fantastic. Do you like sports or reading or hiking or other activities? You live in New York, right? So you've got museums there, concerts.
Yeah. So I keep changing. So right now it's been more like me working out.
Hmm.
But I had a phase with like playing doubles tennis with my business partner and a couple other guys. Then before that it was soccer every Sunday, and before that also it was like a little bit of working out and like saunas and whatnot. So I get into different stuff, but I always have some activity going. I don't get much time for reading because I have to read a lot for work.
Right.
So my eyes get kind of tired with that itself. So I take a break on the weekends from any kind of reading. you know Being in the content space and the development space together, it's a lot of reading. Either I'm reading code or I'm reading a lot of content,
Right.
and figuring out how to optimize it for search engines. So
Mhm.
so yeah, but yeah, listening to music and all the general things that people do, and concerts since COVID. It's all that has
Mhm.
reduced a little bit,
Right.
concerts and things like that. But I love seeing live bands. I love seeing live jazz.
Hmm.
So whenever I get the time for those things, definitely live jazz or comedy shows. I love
Yes.
going to comedy shows because I can totally uh, detach from everything, and I try
Unwind.
to sit on that first seat so they pick on me.
That's great. And call you up to the stage and uh, mock you
Yeah.
and use an example.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love the attention. To be honest, I don't mind accepting that, because I kept wondering why like sometimes people sitting on that first seat get so shy and offended, because I feel like when you're going to sit on the first seat on a comedy show, you almost know the comic's going to pick on you. So it has to be. I think it has to be a willing decision.
That's wonderful. Um, Before we close, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think just one thing, because most of my experience and work in the last few years has been around working with startups and app
Mhm.
development for startups. So just a couple of things for them. Like in short, I would say that a lot of people come up with ideas and start executing them immediately in the startup space without any market research,
Mm.
without seeing whether this is, because you can have a great idea, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a great business, you know. And people of young age that are getting in the startup scene, I just want to share that message that you need to understand that a great idea is not always a great business,
Mm.
and 99% of your ideas have been executed somewhere in the world. So so you have to really do your market research in terms of the marketing front and costs to see how you're going to acquire users or customers, and
Mm.
if the math adds up, because a lot of time for a great idea the math might not add up, so it's worthless executing. So yeah, consulting people like me, or I'm always available, not for any charge. Like if a startup just wants to talk to me a couple of times and swing by an idea and just get an opinion from me or my business partner on whether we think it is formidable, or what changes can be made, how best can be executed in the most cost effective way. We're happy to share our opinions because we've worked with so many startups. We're happy to share our opinion, like at no cost or anything like that. So, but apart from us too, it's important to like talk to people more and more before you start executing and spending your money on something, even if it's yours or any family, because people do family investment rounds these days, and families kind of just blindly support you. They're like, okay, you have a great idea, like we're happy to support you if they have the money, right? So don't take such risks, because we've seen clients come to us after spending $500,000 and no product or no sales, no finished product, no sales.
Yeah.
So, I could speak about a lot, but I think this is really important. And I think the young founders, or even, older founders that are thinking of new ideas, need to know that, don't just go on executing any idea with finances being involved or taking loans. There's a lot of private lenders just waiting for you to take loans. So, don't do that. Do enough research, talk to enough people, make sure that there's a market gap for this idea that you're coming up with, So yeah, that's the only message I'd like to give is parting ways. And
well, it's extremely generous of you to offer you and your partners free consulting services to young startups. And your website is StartItUpNYC.com, correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
So people can find you. Perfect. Well, thank you, Adi. It's been a wonderful pleasure meeting with you and learning your wonderful insights and ideas. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for having me. Pleasure meeting you as well. And I hope to keep in touch.
Thank you. So this has been Philip Auerbach. Please join us again next week for another edition of Global Gurus and their stories of international business. And you can find me at auerbach-intl.com, AUERBACH-INTL.com. Thank you. Hope to see you next week as well.